Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my book garden. Welcome also to Copper Coins Book 2, Part 1. I'm so excited to be back and to be reading this again with you all. How is everyone doing today? While we wait for that though, we'll go through just a couple of things. So this is a chill stream. What that means is I will be talking to myself, I'll be talking to the book, I'll be talking to my lovely book garden. But also I might occasionally look something up, make a comment. Hello, Cookielicious, how are you doing? Maybe even show a picture just to clarify a word or something, because I want all of us to have the best experience. But yes, my camera is not focusing on me, so I'm gonna lower it a little bit. It's a little. There we go. Hi! Now you can actually see my face. This is also a mature stream. There will be mature topics, which could mean violence, occasionally sexy times, not so much in this book, but yes. Hello, little potato. And you're tired. It's 6 a.m. here, so I'll just listen to Hey, I appreciate you tuning in, Cookielicious. Hello, Chi Kiki. Welcome. But yeah, so this is a mature stream. It was bugging me that it was not straightish in the background, but yes, that'll work. But yes. Hey, Gabby Fest. Welcome. I'm excited that you got to make a live stream too. We're just going through kind of some of the semantics at the beginning. But yes, including the mature elements, these streams may occasionally also have triggering things. So for the live stream, there's not much I can do to predict that. A lot of these books I'm reading for the first time. So usually if I think some triggering things are coming up, I might give a warning, I'll take a timestamp, and we'll progress from there. If you're watching this later, you will get a little indication at the title where it says trigger warning, and then there will be a description, simplified description in the description, timestamps, and potentially a little warning, but yes. So Cookielicious, we don't know what we're gonna be reading at Copper Coins yet. Once we get to book 3, I'll kind of do the post that I usually do, and we'll be able to pick through like 3 or 4. But I'll definitely like think about maybe potentially some options if you want to put some out there. If people are interested. But yes, I don't really have a plan yet. Okay. I am not sponsored. I do this just because I can, because I want to, because I want these books out there. So I don't make anything. The only thing I do owe a physical copy over there and my time, and sometimes not even that. Kaleidoscope of Death, huh? I will definitely note that down. I have Demon Venerable is also an option. Usually I try to do series that are almost done or are fully done, just because then it's continuity. I don't know too much about Kaleidoscope of Death, but I will keep it in mind. Last thing though, I am not a fluent speaker. I do my best, but I will flub up some of the names, especially names and places. But I'm trying. Horror Unlimited Flow Danme. Like, I've seen it around. I just don't know how many books are in the series and also just the release schedule. I'll look into it. No promises. But yes. How's everybody been? I know I usually never take breaks between this, and then I did. So how was everyone's 4th of July to those in the states that celebrated? Yeah. All good. I've gotten better about it, but I will still stumble or just stumble over words, you know. Language can be hard. But yeah, I do have some goodies to share. So I ordered from Buccinelli, and these actually arrived. So these are Golden Terrace pins that are absolutely gorgeous. These are boys. And you know this has a special place in my heart because this was the second series we ever read on this channel, and they are so beautiful. So that's the first set. And then we also have these. So this one you will recognize from our last series, Peerless. This is Chubu Chu and Feng Xiao, which are gorgeous. Oh, you finished Ballad of the Painted Swallow. It was really good. I will have to keep that in mind, Chi Chi Kiki. So we have Shen Xiao. And then we have oh goodness. I was about to say Where Winds Meet. That's not it. I feel like such a fake fan. Word of Honor. There we go. Which, if you have not seen it and have the chance to, definitely watch it. It is amazing. But yes, you guys know that I'm part of the Buccinel Pin Club and Patreon, and she is amazing. So these were some of her old pins that she re-released and everything. I also got a Zuzzy Lang one, but I used it this past weekend because I did do a like beach casual cosplay thing and made a little pin bag. But so that one you will see later. I also ended up making a pin board with my niece during the time I was off. So you will get to see that soon. But yes. I also ended up picking up some pins from Suchi Ron Ichil, which I am almost certainly saying incorrectly. So these are some witch hat pins. So they're Key-Free Brush Buddy and Olrugio Brush Buddy. And then I also do have the Key-Free and Olrugio that are holding these brush buddies, but again, that's on my pin bag. Yes, you definitely do need to watch Witch Hat, Gabby. And then I did end up ordering some stickers from Suchi. So these are the ones I ordered. I got my friend this because she loves them. And then these were the two I ordered. Shocker to everyone here, I'm sure. There's a will, there's a way, and every day means every day. Oh yeah. If you couldn't tell by all the mini dolls behind me, that whole shelf on top, that's just Wangshin. So they're my faves. They're definitely my faves. But yes. And then they also threw in some extras for me because I did have a rather big order. We have Blue Lock, and then we have Hualien. Both very cute. Okay, so that's my haul, and so all of you know from previous videos that new books, even if they're part of a series, we open up a blind box. And so let's see. I think we've opened most of these. I think we have this one and one more for the series. Then we get to start a new series. So let's go ahead and get to it. But yes. All right. Oh, that's so cute. I like the horn. Oh, it's actually fluffy. That's so cute. Oh, and it's got a little mask. But yeah. This is cool. So cute. We get to chill up here for this book. Yes. Okay. So yeah. Ah! All right. Oops, that's upside down. Haha. And then with the little mask. And I think it's pretty cute without, but I shall put it on. Yes. All right. Now we have our bookmark. Okay. Oh, I think actually I posted in the community, I think some of the beach pictures. So they're there. A couple. It was a lot of fun. Some other cosplayers showed up. It was great. But yes. All right. Does anyone have anything else they're really excited about or looking forward to in the coming days? Okay. Someone's playing with my wires. Okay. I have a feeling my lights are going to be playing with me in the background today. It's just going to mess with me. I'll figure out what's going on later. Okay. So last time, who remembers what was going on last time? I can dig up the other books. Okay. It has been a bit, so I'm going to do a little bit bigger of a recap than usual. So we had been venturing into Mantu Island to try and find one of our friend's brothers. 14. So we were looking at Mantu Island, and we ended up finding the brother, or what we later realized was the spirit of the brother, who guided us out through this maze where we learned about a life extending array that used 300 corpses in order to activate. Near the end of it, we're out of the cave. The other brother has created a ritual that gave his brother a better fate, as well as his eyes and ability to not predict the future, but seer, like scry and do such things. So he gave him his gift. So Lu Nianqi now has his gift. Looks like his brother is growing. He switched his fate. So at the end of this, we have reached the point of where we identified a single corpse that was being weighted down by this giant lock. And they end with I'll just read the last couple of pages. Kind of doing a terrible job of this, but it's been a while. So they find some more of the iron tags that were buried. Xuanmin walked up to Lu Shiju's corpse as Shushian spoke. Lu Nianqi was by his brother's side, his hand raised like he wanted to reach out for him, but was too afraid to, as if the moment he did, Lu Shiju would truly be gone forever. Look. Lu Nianqi raised his head, and his eyes fell on Xuanmin. His gaze seemed oddly vacant, increasingly resembling that of a blind person. I can feel he's here. I can touch him, but I can't see him. I can see you and the people on the shore. It's not very clear, and I can't make out their faces, but I can see them. I can't see Shiju at all. Xuanmin glanced at Lu Shiju, who laid on the river stone, his eyes closed. Then he stared into Lu Nianqi's dark eyes for a moment and said, You're not seeing through your eyes. Your vision has already faded. You just haven't realized. What do you mean? Lu Nianqi's throat tightened. Peeking out from under Xuanmin's sleeve, Shu Xian stared at Lu Nianqi's eyes. Oh, that makes sense, Shu Xian said. I was wondering why your eyes lost their light while you were submerged. After a moment's thought, he said to Lu Nianqi, Lu Shiju exchanged his life for yours, so his divination skills were also transferred to you. The abnormalities you're feeling must be related. They haven't fully manifested yet, so you'll have to survive a bit of pain. Lu Nianqi was stunned for a moment. You mean you're saying my eyes will become like Shiju's? Not will. They're mostly there already, Shu Xian said. What you're seeing is no longer the physical form, but she. You're seeing what Lu Shiju did every day. Then the reason I can't see Shiju is because Lu Nianqi's nostrils flared as if he was unable to catch his breath, and when it did come, it was harried and stuttering. He frowned and his eyes grew strained and red. Because of what? Xuanmin raised his hand and pressed his thumb against the acupoint between Lu Nianqi's brows. You've developed a red mole here. Your brother had one that looked the same. This mark signifies that the life exchange was successful. If his soul still lingered in this world, the mole wouldn't have emerged. Life swapping was a forbidden technique. Even when it succeeded, the survivor of the exchange would usually become abnormal. This was because they'd always inherit something from the one who sacrificed their life, whether appearance, personality, or ability. The lines between the two souls blurred. The longer the soul of the sacrificed lingered, the stronger their impact would be on the survivor. In other words, in order to minimize the effect on Lu Nianqi, Lu Shiju hadn't lingered for even a second. The indifferent words he'd said to Lu Nianqi in the tomb were his genuine, final farewell. They'd never meet again. Don't cry! Jiang Xining couldn't find a handkerchief, so he used his fingers to dab the silent tears rolling from Lu Nianqi's eyes. Perhaps... Before he could finish, Lu Nianqi had already passed out, his face devoid of color. It might have been from the unbearable agony in his body or from the shock from the news. In any case, Lu Nianqi would be unconscious for quite a long time. No matter how cold Xuanmin was, or how much of a bastard Shushan was, they weren't about to stroll off and leave behind a dead youth and an unconscious boy. That would be absolutely asinine. For now, they decided to stay in the small house the boys lived in. It was a shabby place. There was an area for cooking and a small, drab hall. The latter only had space enough for a square table, with two side wings on either side. Each of these, each of those held only a single narrow bed and a wooden cabinet, which must have belonged to the two brothers. Though they were staying, in truth, the only person who was occupying the place was the unconscious Lu Nianqi. Xuanmin placed him in one of the rooms, then went to the nearby funerary parlor to order a coffin. After he laid Lu Shiju in the coffin, Xuanmin put it in the other room. Just as Xuanmin sat down in the hall, planning to carefully think over the stone lock and iron tags, Shushian's head poked out from his sleeve. Don't sit down yet. Go find a tailor. A fabric store will do. Xuanmin looked down at him, waiting for his explanation. Shushian scratched at his own head with a claw. Then, with the most authoritative tone he could muster, he said, I'm not wearing any clothes. Xuanmin's eyes roved over the small dragon's body. A second later, he coolly tossed Shushian's previous words back at him. Which book taught you it was okay to coil naked around someone's wrist? Shushian bit Xuanmin again. His dragon's teeth were razor sharp, and each bite left a crescent-shaped mark. Xuanmin's expression remained neutral as he brushed aside his sleeve, revealing his slender, bony fingers. He curled his index and middle fingers and presented them to Shushian. On those fingers were at least 6 bite marks, all thanks to this creature. Shushian turned his head away, pretending not to understand. Stop showing off your hands. They're no better than chicken's feet. Way too bony. Practically useless decorations. Coiling around them feels uncomfortable as hell. Please, just start moving and get me some clothes. Jiang Shiding entered the room in time to hear Shushian's tantrum. Unable to bear watching, he immediately retreated into a sunless corner of the kitchen. Xuanmin shook his head and stood to leave. In the beginning, his trip was just to buy Shushian some clothes, but what would happen while he was out would prove more complicated and lead to quite a few unforeseen developments. Okay, so that is where we left off. I'm going to fix that because it's actually starting to bug me. Hopefully that fixes it. I guess we will see. Okay. Okay. So. Now we begin book 2 of Copper Coins. Before that though, let's go over our counts. So our donkey count is sitting at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. That's rather impressive. Our Jiang Xining suffering is sitting at a very unfortunate 14. Our wanted poster count is sitting at 3. And our face count is sitting at 4. So for the face count, I'm going to have someone keep an eye on that and go ahead and speak up if you think I should put a tally, actually, for any of them. But yes. All right. And with that, let's start Arc 2. Nameless. In the summer of the 23rd year of the Tianxi era, a dragon fell in Huameng County, Guangdong. It stood as tall as a person and measured several hundred feet in length. Ensnared within a net, its skin and flesh were cleaved open. Within it, no spine was found. As the officials and townsfolk gathered to witness the scene, a mighty downpour began. In the surging waves, the dragon was swept out to sea and disappeared without a trace. Chronicles of Huameng County. Also, just a reminder, the quest that they're currently going on is also to find Jiang Xining's sister, who is staying in Anping County, if I can remember correctly. Okay. Chapter 15, Shito Zhang. Lumei Street was Wulong County's busiest avenue. Its name came from the red plum trees planted between the houses and buildings lining both sides. During winter, especially on snowy days, the scarlet petals of the plums fell onto the white snow, dotting the entire street with specks of red. This gorgeous scenic view had become one of Wulong County's most famous attractions, hence the name Lumei, falling plums. The area boasted inns, pawn shops, eateries, and wine houses, along with a variety of other shops. There were several silk and fabric stores nestled between the cosmetics and jewelry shops. Shushian was difficult to please. He didn't want to be seen by passerbys as he coiled around Xuanmin's wrist, but he also didn't want his face entirely covered by the wide sleeve. He insisted that the monk adjust it just enough to show his eyes, but that he would stretch and move his head and tail, mussing the sleeve. He had to badger Xuanmin into fixing it constantly. What well-adjusted person would walk down a road while fiddling with their sleeve over and over? Xuanmin humored Shushian with few words at first, but as the dragon grew more restless, Xuanmin glanced down and shook out his sleeve to cover Shushian entirely. No matter how Shushian thrashed around on Xuanmin's wrist, Xuanmin didn't let him out again. Shushian lay still in the dark for a while, then began leaving bite marks on each of Xuanmin's fingers, from thumb to little finger. Eventually, he clamped down and refused to let go. Xuanmin's finger twitched a few times, but to no avail. In the end, Xuanmin decided to carry on as if his fingers were unbitten. Shushian wasn't even that upset. He had a bad temper and was accustomed to throwing his weight around, so he never reined himself in. But that didn't mean he'd fly into a rage over every trivial thing. He just wanted to provoke Xuanmin. When they'd first been getting to know one another, Shushian had been driven by the indignation he'd felt when Xuanmin had captured him. Over time, his constant mischief became habitual, as if he couldn't feel at ease without constantly causing trouble for Xuanmin. Though they'd faced danger together and Shushian's initial resentment had faded, he couldn't resist acting out from time to time. Perhaps it was because Xuanmin, unlike anyone Shushian had ever met, was absurdly calm and detached. He itched to provoke the monk, to see what he would look like when he lost his composure. He's such a brat. Could be I'm just bored and looking for some amusement at the bald donkey's expense, Shushian thought. 36. Wait, 41. I can't count. 10, 20, 30. Yeah, 41. Such moments of fleeting self-reflection were almost unprecedented for this particular wise one. They usually only happened when he was full and had nothing better to do, or when he was ravenously hungry. Shushian thought hunger was probably the culprit this time. He lazily lowered his head, watching the tip of his tail swaying with Xuanmin's steps. Bald donkey, you still owe me a meal, Shushan grumbled. 42. Not in the habit of muttering to himself in public, Xuan Min didn't reply. To his surprise, Shushan loosened his grip on Xuan Min's little finger. With a shift of his claws, he began scuttling up Xuan Min's wrist, right for his collar. Can't hear me, he said as he climbed. Then I'll say it into your ear. Xuan Min blinked. Shushan's claws, much like his scales, had softened considerably. They caused no pain when they hooked onto Xuanmin's hand, but they did tickle him. This was tolerable when he wasn't moving, but once he started walking, well, it became rather irritating. Xuanmin frowned. The fingers, hidden in his sleeve, pinched the evil spirit's unruly tail and yanked him back down. Shushan narrowed his eyes and dug into Xuanmin's arm, scoring a long line of claw marks as he was dragged downward. Xuanmin's frown deepened as he turned his full focus on Shushan. Since when did I owe you a meal? He asked in a neutral voice. A passing pedestrian, wondering if the monk talking to himself was a bit off in the head, shot Xuanmin a strange look. However, the icy aura radiating from Xuanmin intimidated the stranger. He hastily lowered his head and scuttled away. Xuxian felt a surge of resentment. When you barged into the Jiang family clinic, you ruined my meal. That bookworm went to the eatery at the crack of dawn to buy it for me and almost collapsed from exhaustion bringing it back. Those were their signature dishes. You can't find that flavor anywhere else. I paid for it, but I didn't even get to enjoy 2 bites before you ruined it. Don't you feel even a bit guilty? Shouldn't you make it up to me? His reasoning was sound, his arguments well-rounded. Could anyone say no to him? Hello, Ruby. And yes, he does always say Xuanmin is fussy when he himself is more fussy. Could anyone say no to him? If they did, he'd turn the world upside down. Spotting a clothing shop ahead and noticing how everyone who walked past seemed to duck, Xuanmin decided against saying more. He replied with a nonchalant, turned on his toes, and entered the shop. The owners were a middle-aged couple. The man was busy clanking away on an abacus, while the woman held a copper hand-warmer in her arms, her head bowed as she wove what looked like an intricately designed knot. Xuanmin's steps were silent, and his robes gleamed white like clouds or snow. He might have cut an ethereal figure, but it was also easy to mistake him for someone in mourning at first glance. When his white silhouette lashed in the corner... That's a weird way to put it. When his white silhouette lashed in the corner of the lady shopkeeper's eye, a jolt went through her still weaving hands. Oh, heavens, you scared me, she exclaimed, patting her chest as she looked up. When she saw the newcomer was a young monk, she froze for a moment, her expression shifting to something uncertain. It was deep in winter, and few were out and about. Moreover, the day had been overcast since the morning, and there had been rumors of a strange thunderous downpour by the river earlier, complete with towering white waves. With dark clouds looming overhead once more, the few pedestrians on the street further quickened their pace. The couple's shop had yet to make a single sale that day. They finally had a customer, only to discover it was a monk. What good was a monk? The lady shopkeeper automatically looked at Xuanmin's hands. He wasn't carrying an alms bowl, so he wasn't there to beg. However, her expression didn't brighten much. Monks held a somewhat peculiar status these days, thanks to the current state preceptor. Everyone knew the state preceptor was a monk and was exceptionally powerful one at that. Rumors spoke about his extraordinary abilities, that he was capable of overturning the heavens with the flip of his hand. Most importantly, he'd lived for a long time. So long that no one could say for certain just how old he was. He'd served 5 generations of emperors, and his tenure as state preceptor alone spanned over a century. Not gonna lie, being stuck in a government position for that long would be awful. Like, ugh. Ordinary citizens could see the state preceptor at most once a year during the annual winter solstice ceremony at Mount Tai. A grand procession would travel from the capital to the foot of the mountain, and townsfolk along its path could catch a fleeting glimpse of the man, though they had to be discreet about it. My dude, retire. The state preceptor always wore a silver beast mask, while his voluminous robes and crimson cassia concealed his hands and feet. I'm kind of curious what that looks like. His face remained hidden, making his age impossible to discern. Cassia. Cassia? Let me look. Cassia. Cassia typically refers to either the traditional patchwork robes worn by Buddhist monks or Kaseya, a major global provider of. Nope, we're going the robe. Kaseya robe. Image. Oh! Oh, okay. It's this. It's this. What's a Kaseya? I guess his is red. Oh, okay. Here. We got it. There we go. Cool. Or I guess this would probably be. There we go. Nice. Okay. His the state preceptor always wore a silver beast mask, while his voluminous robes and crimson cassia concealed his hands and feet. His face remained hidden, making his age impossible to discern. Some swore that he wasn't human at all. They said that though his face and limbs were hidden away, looking at his neck was enough to prove he wasn't an old man. When people aged, wrinkles that were impossible to hide formed on their necks. Living a long life was one thing, but living over a century without any signs of aging? That was downright terrifying. Others claimed they'd seen the state preceptor during a procession, and his neck had shown signs of wrinkles then. Still, they didn't think he looked elderly, more like a middle aged man. Another group believed that the state preceptor had been replaced multiple times over the years, but the mask kept anyone from noticing. In any case, opinions varied, and it was difficult to separate truth from fiction. Commoners always held a certain reverence for the mysterious and the unknown. However, the state preceptor was not only enigmatic in appearance and age, his personality was also said to be eccentric and mercurial, so prone to change. Rumors about him abounded in the capital. Some said that he was currently observing a vow of silence. He'd ceased speaking, his demeanor as cold as the snow on Mount Tianshan. His attendants were left in a constant state of anxiety, unsure whether they were doing the right thing or not. There were also claims that he practiced the dark arts. Every few years, he'd taken a wise and promising child or two, only for them to vanish without a trace. Some speculated that they'd been transformed into medicinal puppets or other sinister creations. At times, it was said, a faint scent of blood lingered around his residence. The spine chilling tales left people too frightened to imagine the details. These rumors had no clear source. After all, no one dared to gossip about the state preceptor using their real names. Those who'd publicly opposed him in the past had all met untimely ends. That had only made the commoners more inclined to believe the rumors. Moreover, although the state preceptor had quelled many natural and man made disasters, each time he resolved a crisis, strange events followed. This only deepened the people's fear of him, and many considered him a demonic monk. They feared that he might succumb to some dark ailment one day, and then no one would be able to control him. He had been notably absent from this year's winter solstice ceremony. Some claimed he met with a great disaster and had been forced into secluded cultivation. At best, he was dealing with some thorny issues, and at worst, his absence from the ceremony suggested a life or death situation. Perhaps his lifespan was nearing its end. The common folk secretly rejoiced at this possibility. Decades ago, before the rumors about the state preceptor had spread, the populace had treated monks well, and temples across the nation had overflowed with incense. Once the rumors began to circulate, however, the reputation of monks became somewhat negative. When people needed rituals performed or evil spirits exorcised, they grudgingly sought out temples for assistance. Still, most people preferred not to interact with monks and avoided them altogether on an average day. Now that one had come to their tailor's shop, they couldn't just turn him away, and Chuan Min was rather handsome. When the lady shopkeeper's gaze swept over his face, her expression softened a little. She set her knot on the counter and rose to greet him. Why would a monk come to a tailor's shop for monk's robes? She wondered. Shifu, are you here to purchase some garments? Xuanmin offered no explanation. Was all he said before scanning the clothing on the display. The lady shopkeeper clutched her hand warmer. This monk was acting so coldly she couldn't find it in herself to be warm toward him. She nudged her husband, who was still clacking away on the abacus. Stop fiddling with that thing. We'll handle the calculations later. Go attend to our guest. Her husband was the languid type. He rubbed his lower back and looked up. Did she just call him lazy? What kind of style are you looking for, young Shifu? His speech was slow and measured. We've never made monk's robes in our humble shop before, but if you need one, we can have one tailored for you overnight. We'll just need to take your measurements. No need, Xuanmin replied. The lady shopkeeper stared, always with one or two word answers. How was she supposed to conduct business like this? It was clear that Xuan Min had never set foot in a shop like this before, and he seemed like a wandering ghost standing there in his white robes. He didn't bother to pick and choose, he just casually rifled through the sleeves a few nearby winter overcoats. He glanced at their length and roughly recalled the height of Shushian's human form, intending to pick a few items at random. The dragon coiled around his wrist wasn't having it. That thing's thick enough to block gaps in city walls, complained Shushian. If I wore that, and I'd be rolling on the ground like a ball. I think they missed something. If I were that, and I'd be rolling on the ground like a ball. I don't want it. Buy it and wear it yourself. He knew he couldn't be too unruly in the shop, so he kept his voice down, the words muffled as they traveled through the folds of Xuanmin's robes. The lady shopkeeper held her hand warmer tighter and studied Xuanmin for a moment. Her gaze traveled from his hands to the winter coats. Suddenly, she understood. Are you buying these for someone else? Said Xuanmin, still focused on the clothing. Uh, do you have any preferences or requirements? The lady shopkeeper asked. If I may ask, who are you buying it for? We might be able to recommend a few items. Schwanman's gaze fell on a particularly garish overcoat. Its colors were bright enough to make anyone's eyes bleed. Recalling Shu Xian's ability to throw a fit over every single little thing, Xuanmin offered a concise description. Someone who chases people around like a pheasant and pecks at them. Neither Shu Xian nor the lady shopkeeper knew what to say to that. The easygoing shopkeeper pointed at the lurid coat. His eyes squinted in a perpetual smile. Shifu, the one in front of you, is quite nice. Bright colors and a fresh design. Yeah, I could just imagine Shu Xian's reaction. The jacket was a mishmash of colors, as if it had been stripped straight off a pheasant. It was indeed a perfect match. Oh, I forgot to show the pictures in the front. I wonder if we have a picture of the coat. I will show the pictures in the front after this chapter. Unfortunately, it does not have that. You must have a death wish, Shu Xian muttered venomously. When Xuan Min placed his silver on the counter, the lady shopkeeper's mouth twitched. This monk must not leave his temple much, she thought. He's completely clueless about market prices. In this county, buying a housecoat just over 20 taels of silver. Buying a house cost just over 20 taels of silver. Who would throw that much money at just 3 pieces of clothing? Without comment, her husband picked up a small copper scale to weigh the silver and instructed his wife to count out the change for Xuan Min. As Xuan Min rested his hand on the counter, Shu Xian happened to notice a half-finished knot lying there. He stared at the knot for a moment, then poked Xuan Min with his claw. While the couple was distracted, he swiftly climbed up to Xuan Min's neck. Now this is a surprise. Look at that knot. Does it resemble the pattern carved at the base of the stone lock? Shu Xian whispered. That stone lock was hefty, so carrying it around everywhere was impractical. Xuan Min had borrowed some simple tools from the Lu family to make a rubbing of the pattern at its base instead. Since Shu Xian had spent so much time in Xuanmin's pouch that he practically treated it as his own nest, he stuffed it with anything and everything, including the paper with the rubbing and the iron tags he'd pulled from the riverbed. Fortunately, they were all small and lightweight items. Otherwise, Xuanmin's monk robes would have been torn open. Xuanmin coolly pulled the paper from his pouch and compared it to the knot. The pattern on the paper was strange and resembled a totem. It was a circular design with a clawed creature perched on top, a bat or something similar, perhaps, and swirling cloud patterns below. Of course, a woven knot couldn't look exactly like a carving. The carved creature had a primitive ferocity to it, while the woven knot was rounded and much gentler. At first glance, it wasn't a perfect match, but closer inspection proved them quite similar. Xuanmin and Shu Xian had never seen such a pattern before and were prepared for a difficult investigation, but to their surprise, they'd already made some progress. What is this knot used for? Xuanmin asked. He put the paper away and tapped the counter. The lady shopkeeper had been counting out copper coins as per her husband's instructions. Oh, it's a blessing knot for peace and good fortune. Upon raising her head, she noticed Xuanmin's expression. Not something you see often, right? I learned this pattern a few years ago. I haven't seen it anywhere else, but it really works. My son's avoided quite a few disasters wearing it, though the knot itself keeps breaking. Where did you learn this pattern? From Shitu Zhang's wife, the lady shopkeeper replied. Realizing that Xuanmin might not be local, she elaborated. She too, Zhang, is a famous stonemason in our county, known for his exquisite craftsmanship. Quite a few officials from the capital have invited him there. His wife is fairly talented herself and enjoys weaving beautiful trinkets. I learned it from her. She told Zhang, she too, stone. Shushian thought of the stone lock submerged in the river. Stone here, stone there. It's not just a coincidence, surely. Xuanmin had picked up on it too. He picked up the wrapped clothes as well as the copper coins. Where does this Shitu Zhang live? Head east along the street and turn onto Hugua Alley. There's a pile of stone materials in front of the gates. Huaishou Prefecture was renowned for its carvings. Many came here looking for skilled artisans to carve all sorts of trinkets, so the lady shopkeeper found nothing suspicious about his queries and readily told him the answer. Unlike Shushian, Xuanmin had no problem with directions. A couple of turns later, he arrived at Hugua Alley. The lady shopkeeper's description was apt, and the residents jumped out right away. Standing at the entrance of the lane, he saw a compound with a small mountain of stone materials piled near the gates. He walked up to the gates and knocked with the brass knocker. However, there was no response from within. Are you also here to see Shito Zhang, young Shifu? Middle-aged man asked as he walked by. He's not home. I live next door, and his place has been empty for over half a month. It's always dark and silent inside. Maybe some out-of-town official invited him for a job again. The man continued on, muttering to himself, but his wife hasn't been home either. Perhaps they're out visiting the relatives. He paused. Who knows? In any case, knocking won't help. Several groups have come looking for him over the past 2 weeks, and they all left empty-handed. You might want to come back another time. He glanced at the sky and hurried off without another word, quickly entering the gates of a nearby compound. Xuanmin watched the man go before turning away. He remained outside Shitu Zhang's gates, his arms loose at his sides. Shushian was feeling uncomfortably cooped up and twitched his claws. Seeing that no one was around, he poked his head out of Xuanmin's sleeve and gulped down some fresh air. Xuanmin brushed at Shushian's slender tail with his fingers and frowned. Why are you suddenly burning up? I'm not just hot. I feel bloated, too, Shushian replied. His long tongue hung limply from his half-open mouth. He looked almost lifeless. The sensation was a familiar one. The last time he'd experienced it was on Fentu Island, which had led to him reclaiming his true form at last. Now that the feeling had resurfaced, there was no way he could ignore it. With his tongue still lolling, Shushian slurred to Xuanmin. Do me a favor and either break down the door or climb over the wall. There's something hidden in this guy's house. And once we're inside, find an empty room to put me down in. Bring the new clothes with you, Shushian added after a moment's thought. Xuanmin already had a hand on the gate of the Zhang residence, but he paused. Why? Shushian chuckled dryly. My body is swelling so much that I might not be able to maintain this form. If I don't transform into a human, I'll revert to my true form and half of Wulong County will be flattened. You'll end up as a pancake, little monk. I mean, it might be everyone but him. Let's be real. He already got crushed once by the dragon. So like Xuanmin blinked. Whether Xuanmin in particular would end up as a pancake remained to be seen, but Xu Xian found himself being dragged into the Zhang family courtyard by the tail regardless. If this weren't so uncomfortable, you'd be getting pelted by thunderbolts right now, Xu Xian threatened. He probably meant to look menacing, but with his head spinning from the heat, his words came out listless and whiny. Even his attempts to bare his claws resulted in only ineffectual twitching. He wasn't intimidating in the slightest. Xuanmin had been half unconscious back in the river and missed Xuxian's majestic ascent into the clouds. Looking at this skinny, punny dragon now, it was hard to imagine him as a fearsome creature. Xuanmin had planned to enter the compound and find a random room in which to set the tiny dragon down, but once he actually stepped into the courtyard, he changed his mind. Xuxian was so overheated that he lost all sense of time and his mind was in a fog of confusion. He noticed that Xuanmin had stopped just inside the gate. Perhaps he had seen something and was assessing the situation, for he made no move to proceed further. The grip on Xuxian's tail released, and Xuanmin placed him back on the bony jut of his wrist. However, Xuxian's claws were weak and unable to keep their grip. He couldn't even lift his head, let alone coil himself around Xuanmin's wrist. The moment he was placed there, unable to hold on, he began sliding down Xuanmin's hand. At least Xuanmin's skin proved to be cool. Though Xuxian seemed about to burst into flames, he found some relief pressing himself to it. After slipping down twice, Xuxian felt Xuanmin pull him elsewhere. He was now cradled in Xuanmin's palm, preventing him from falling to the ground. That's nice. Palms tended to be warmer due to their link with the fire within the heart. Xuxian squirmed a few times, finding this spot less pleasant than Xuanmin's wrist, and drowsily sought to move elsewhere. Drawn instinctively to the coolest area possible, Xuxian soon wound himself around Xuanmin's fingers and wove through the gaps between them. Xuxian snaked around the root of each finger, capitalizing on every bit of coolness he could find. The tip of his tail dangled from Xuanmin's little finger, and his head pressed against Xuanmin's thumb. The soft scales of his belly and back brushed against Xuanmin's skin. That looks so cute. Like just imagining him like woven in between the fingers. Like that seems pretty cool. Xuanmin frowned slightly and glanced downward. When he saw Xuxian's drowned worm appearance, he sighed in resignation and let him be. Shito Zhang was a stonemason through and through, and his courtyard was crowded with even more stones than the area outside the gate. Heaps of rocks of various sizes and heights almost encircled the yard, leaving only a small gap by the entrance just wide enough for one person to squeeze through. As for why Xuanmin had paused after entering the courtyard, these were no ordinary stones. With the exception of a few unfinished or discarded pieces, most of the stones in the yard had been carved into mythical beasts. Xuanmin scanned them, identifying a single-horned animal resembling a deer or horse known as a Tianlu, a beast resembling a lion or tiger called a bixi, and a thick-maned, hornless creature known as a Tao Ba. Every single one was a fierce beast with the power to dispel evil and misfortune. Okay, slight pause. I'm going to look those up real quick so I can show a picture. All right. The mental image of that is so cute. Yes, it is. All right, so first we shall look up Tianlu. Okay, so here is literally a Tianlu sculpture. So this is what it looks like. I guess since he was talking about the single horn, I guess this is more like the Tianlu. Okay. Now let's look up a Bixie. Oh, this one has the actual face of it. Nice. Oh, focus. It's a Bixie and a thick-maned hornless creature known as a Tauba. Alright, I gotta be a little more specific with this one. Tauba statue. Creature. Thick-maned, hornless creature known as a Tauba. I'm looking, but there's... That one's gonna have to be a question mark. So, I'm not finding one that applies. Alright, let's restart. Every single one was a fierce beast with the power to dispel evil and misfortune. Shi Tu Zhang's craftsmanship was extraordinary. His statues were both exquisite and lifelike. The larger ones stood as tall as a person, and the smaller ones were about waist height. Some were gazing down, while others stared straight ahead. Some had their eyes half closed, and others remained wide awake. All of them faced the gate. Between these stone beasts were crammed smaller statues of coiled tortoises, celestial dogs, and the like. The sculptures were packed so densely the effect became almost stifling. Most people stepping into the courtyard would probably be scared out of their wits at the sight. Whether they could actually ward off any evil wasn't clear, but they'd certainly worked for scaring people away. That was the real odd part. It was normal for stonemasons living off his craft to showcase some of his sculptures and skills, but to choose a display so terrifying, that truly gave one pause. Oh, hello, Esper Lady. Um, so we have traveled into town, and we have found a clue about the stone lock and the pattern on it, and are now visiting the stonemason that taught the person, the seamstress, how to do that knot and pattern. And we have arrived in a courtyard that is being protected by a number of ferocious stone beasts carvings. that are all pointed toward the gate, and that is where we are at. I hope you are doing well. Whether they would actually ward off any evil wasn't clear, but they'd certainly work for scaring people away. That was the real odd part. It was normal for a stonemason living off his craft to showcase some of his sculptures and skills, but to choose a display so terrifying, that truly gave one pause. Xuanmin scrutinized the moss-covered stone slabs beneath the statues, then reached out to touch the nearest sculpture. The moss on the stone slabs suggested that these statues hadn't been placed here for long, maybe just a month or two. Some of the sculptures were newly carved, and though they appeared robust and lively, the details suggested that they had been crafted in haste. If the goal was to attract visitors, such hastily finished pieces would never have been given such a prominent display. Why are you just standing there like an idiot? Shushian mumbled. I'm about to burst. Without even looking at him, Xuanmin flicked his thumb against Shushian's head. An array has been placed in the courtyard. If I walked forward, you'd probably suffocate from bloating before finding a house to rest in. Ugh, just speak normally. Don't mess with my head while doing so. I'm already dizzy enough without you making it worse. Xuanmin glanced down this time. Shu Xian wasn't exaggerating. It would be an understatement to say that his dragon scales were scalding hot. If the one holding him weren't Xuan Min, but the likes of Jiang Xining or Lu Nianqi, they would have screamed in pain and shaken him off by now. It was like having a cup of hot tea spilled on your hand right onto the thin skin between your fingers. Ow! That's right, because he is twined in between his fingers. It was a mystery how this evil spirit hadn't burned himself stupid by now. Noticing that Shu Xian kept seeking out cooler spots, Xuan Min figured he must have been in considerable discomfort. He placed the fingers of his other hand on Shu Xian's scaly skin. Shu Xian, barely conscious, let out a contented sigh and shifted his body, pressing his head against Xuan Min's fingertips. He didn't mind having his head touched anymore. Xuanmin sighed to himself and began walking around the courtyard, following the circle of stone carvings. He hadn't noticed when observing from a distance, but up close he saw that there were small, thumb-sized stones scattered among the intimidating stone beasts. They looked like ordinary pebbles, but he realized now that they were miniature stone tablets. But yeah. The craftsmanship in this region was renowned not only for its exceptional intricacy, but also for its artisans' ability to carve anything and everything. Intricate designs could be etched on surfaces as small as a grain of rice. That's crazy. Likewise, these tiny tablets were exquisitely detailed. Upon each tablet was the fierce, lifelike face of a beast, each ear, horn, nose, and mouth meticulously carved. Even the eyes were carefully dotted with tiny pupils. Below each beast's face, in minuscule script, were three characters. Shigang Dang. Shigan Dang. Shigong Dang were spirit stones used to dispel evil and misfortune. They were commonly placed at the entrances of residences, inauspicious locations, or street intersections to drive away malevolent spirits. In some regions, they were also called stone generals. Oh, there's that term again, stone generals. Regardless of the name, typical households would only place one or two Shigandan at key locations such as the Death Gate or areas with heavy yin energy. It was unusual to see them densely packed around stone statues as they were in the Zhang family courtyard. There were approximately 20 Shigong Dong of various sizes in Shito Zhang's yard, obstructing 7 of the 8 directions. The only open path led to the gate, making the message clear. Return from whence you came. It turned out that the menacing stone creatures scattered across the courtyard were a facade to frighten the ignorant onlooker. The true source of protection lay in the unassuming Shigan Dong. Your breathing is so loud, Shushan muttered drowsily. In his daze, he somehow still found it in himself to complain. Xuanmin paused for a moment. If I'm not mistaken, the loud breathing is coming from you. Shushan was a master at blaming others for his own faults, but Xuanmin didn't bother arguing further. After all, Shushian's heaving, bellow-like breaths were evidence enough of his discomfort. Shushian hung his head in silence for a while before he processed that the heavy breathing was his own. The reason it was so hard to ignore was that their surroundings were unnaturally silent, as if they'd been trapped within the courtyard, or someone had deliberately suppressed all other sounds in the house. Xuanmin rubbed Shushian's head with his cool fingers. Ignoring the stone beast meant to divert his attention, he swept his gaze over the circle of Shigandang twice. Just as I thought, he muttered. What do you mean, just as you thought, huh? Shushian might have been both physically and mentally useless, but he stubbornly kept his ears open. Pass out already. Xuanmin pressed a finger against what might have been Shushian's ear. The more restless the wise one became, the hotter his body grew. Xuanmin felt like Shushian might combust spontaneously at any moment. Hopefully, he wouldn't actually explode. 1 second. Shushian reached out an unsteady claw to scratch Xuanmin's hand, but he couldn't quite reach it. He no longer had the strength to cause trouble. What Xuanmin had noticed was that the Shigandang were arranged in a specific order. The eyes of the beastly faces on the tablets weren't quite the same. Some had their eyes wide open, some had them half closed, and others had theirs completely shut. The progression from closed to open eyes indicated the sequence he needed to follow. Xuanmin reached for the string of copper coins at his waist. As his fingers brushed the edge of the coins, the wound on his finger began to bleed again. A few drops of blood were enough to make the coins emit a soft, resonant hum. It had been a long time since he had used these coins. Each time he touched them, a strange sense of aversion would swell within him. Not toward the coins themselves, but toward something else he couldn't quite place. He'd always avoided using them unless it was absolutely necessary. It wasn't until he awakened the coins with his blood in the underground tomb on Fentu Island that he broke free of those feelings. With use came familiarity. The technique for making use of them came naturally, as if it were ingrained in his body rather than his memory. How many times had he done this to be so familiar with their workings? One by one, he confirmed the positions of the Shigandang, northeast, due west, due north, southwest. Each time he moved to a new cardinal direction, he flicked a coin with his index finger. Oh, I got it! The sound of the coins wasn't the usual metallic clink, but more like the deep resonant toll of an ancient bell. That kind of worked! With each chime, the Shigandang in the corresponding position shattered with a sharp crack. A fragment of broken stone inadvertently rolled into the wrong position, clanking against the clawed foot of a Bixie statue that stood as tall as a person. The Bixie's half-closed eyes slowly opened wider, and its head tilted. Its hefty chest began to rise and fall faintly, as if it had come to life. Just when it raised its front paw, arched its back, and prepared to pounce, Xuan Min calmly stepped to the next position and flicked another coin. The Bixie that had been poised to strike turned back to stone, frozen in its pouncing stance. After 8 measured chimes, all the Shi Gan Dong lay shattered on the ground. In an instant, faint sounds filtered into the courtyard, and the entire house seemed to come alive. The stone beasts moved aside by themselves, opening up several paths leading to the short corridor, the side rooms, and the main hall. As the paths opened, the sound of frightened sobbing came from the direction of the main hall. Xuanmin's brow furrowed, and he strode swiftly into the main hall. Behind an intricately carved screen stood a short, pot-bellied man, trembling as he stared at Xuanmin. His face was ashen with fear, his posture guarded. He clutched a sword that was around 2 feet long, but it was an unusual one. It wasn't made of bronze or iron. Instead, it had a skeletal hue, as if it had been carved from the bone of some creature. Who do we think that creature's going to be? 2 guesses. A searing pain shot through Xuanmin's palm, and the grip around his fingers suddenly loosened. Deafening roars erupted in his ears, startling the short man so badly he fell to the ground. The sword in his hand quivered like a leaf in the wind. Boom! A massive black shadow loomed behind Xuanmin. Golden light flashed as thunderclouds churned above, and 4 bolts of lightning streaked down from the heavens. 4 deafening bangs sounded, 1 to the east, 1 to the west, 1 to the south, and 1 to the north. Each lightning bolt struck around the man with precision, narrowly missing him. He was so terrified that tears streamed down his face and a wet stain spread across his pants. I mean, imagine 4 bolts of lightning just suddenly shot towards you. Like, I'd be pretty afraid too, like, not gonna lie. Oh, focus on me, camera. Thank you. My boys in the back are just too pretty. It never focuses on my face. In the thunderous howl, a majestic dragon's head emerged from behind Xuanmin, carrying the might and ferocity of a tiger's snarl. It thrust itself before the man, its voice menacing. Who gave you such daring to carve a sword from the bone of a dragon? The man's eyes crossed in terror, and he fainted on the spot. I'd die on the spot. I mean, he did faint on the spot, so, like, you're not far off, Ruby. Seeing that he'd successfully frightened a man into unconsciousness, Shu Xian turned his massive dragon head to Xuanmin, his expression nonchalant. I was about to suffocate there. The tiny dragon that had spent all day coiled around Xuanmin's wrist, small enough that its tail could be pinched between 2 fingers, had transformed into this. Anyone would need a moment to adjust. Xuanmin stared at the enormous dragon head that was nearly half his height, then glanced at the dragon's coiled body, large enough it might burst from the courtyard. His expressionless face froze as solid as ice. Shu Xian's massive head remained still as he studied Xuanmin's face, catching a flicker of something complex in the monk's otherwise unconcerned eyes. He squinted and let out a snort. Are you pretending to be calm? Xuanmin shot Shu Xian a sidelong glance. Even when transformed, this wise one's tone remained exactly the same. Alright, so here's what our stonemason saw. I mean, let's be real. I'd be pretty scared too. I'd probably think like someone like either spiked my drink or like I was hallucinating, but like I'd be pretty scared all the same. Death. Did I scare you so much your legs buckled? Shushian raised one of his sharp claws and leisurely poked Xuanmin in the back, as if mere prodding would cause the monk to collapse right then and there. You must still be half asleep, Xuanmin replied. He felt a fleeting bit of surprise and discomfort, but it would be disingenuous to say he was stunned. Xuanmin had lived for a fair amount of time, and he'd never once experienced what it was to be truly dumb, but found no trace of fear whatsoever. Shushian scrutinized him for a moment, but found no trace of fear whatsoever. His massive head thudded upon his claw with a dull thump. You, bald donkey, are the most boring person I've ever met, Shushian said in a lifeless monotone. I've never seen anyone like you. Having failed to scare the person he'd wanted to scare the most, thus missing out on his chance to make Xuanmin lose his composure, Shushian felt a wave of tedium wash over him. Even the initial shock and anger at seeing his own bone faded. He swiped a claw at the short man's hand, and the white dragon bone sword clattered to the ground. He picked it up. So we're at 43. I did not forget the donkey. The moment he saw the intricate patterns carved into the sword, his anger flared up again. Who the hell did this guy think he was? How dare he? Shushian was too furious to look at the sword any longer. With a surge of heat from his right forefoot, the sword melted as if burned by flames, seeping into his body through the sole of his foot. All that remained was a faint smoldering warmth at the tips of his claws. Shushian is so unreasonable, really. Yeah, he really is, Ruby. But he felt a twinge of regret after absorbing the sword. The heat coursing through his meridians, pulling in his spine, where it caused him immense discomfort. The sensation of warmth and swelling, which had only just started to subside, returned with a vengeance. Unfortunately, his head was too large right now. He couldn't roll around, let alone rub against the gaps between Xuanmin's fingers to cool down. That's what you get for being dramatic. After a moment's hesitation, he subtly moved the front half of his body. In an instant, Xuanmin was enveloped on all sides by Shushian's enormous figure. The dragon had silently coiled around him, trapping him in the center. Xuanmin looked up. Why are you rubbing against me? Shushian glanced down at him in disdain, then turned his head away and said with feigned gravity, I'm borrowing your coolness. If I catch fire, you'll be doomed too. Things hadn't been so bad when the dragon was tiny. He'd only burned the area around Xuanmin's hand. Now that Shushian was the size of a house, him coiling around Xuanmin was like wrapping the monk in 7 or 8 layers of cotton padding, encircling him with fire pits and smoldering him with a heavy quilt. Deeply uncomfortable, in other words. Xuanmin's gaze inadvertently fell on the bundle of clothes in his hand. Shushian, turning his head back, followed his line of sight. Wonderful. He was still naked. Shushian's face remained expressionless in contemplation. He hadn't cared about such trivial matters when he was half conscious earlier. Touching something cool had felt like grabbing a lifeline. Who cared if he was clothed or not? He wasn't even in human form. Nonetheless, screw it. I'm hot, and I'm still not in human form. With that thought, Shushian shamelessly rubbed against Xuanmin a couple more times. Xuanmin was flabbergasted. Just because Shushan had spent time living among humans didn't mean he had truly become one of them. Dragons might have been divine, but they were beasts at heart. His temperament carried a certain raw, unbridled wildness. When he was hot, he needed to stop being hot. Comfort came first. Everything else could wait. I mean, I respect that. But his eyes flicked toward Xuanmin. If he wasn't mistaken, a faint wave of discomfort flashed over Xuanmin's face, so quick it was almost imperceptible. Then Xuanmin frowned. Frowned! Xuanmin rarely showed much emotion. He only frowned when he encountered something dirty or troublesome. In short, it was usually a sign of disgust or distaste. Shushan froze, struck by an inexplicable pang of discomfort. It was as if a line of spiders were crawling across his chest, their tiny legs prickling unpleasantly. The scorching heat that had overwhelmed him seemed to drop away all at once. Well, it was becoming more tolerable, at least. Xuan's coiled body relaxed, leaving some space around Xuanmin. It was unusual for someone so unruly to turn considerate. Xuanmin glanced at him in surprise, only to see that Xuxian was focused, the short man lying unconscious on the ground. Perhaps it was the sheer intimidation of his enormity, or simply that a dragon's face wasn't built to express emotions. Now that Xuxian wasn't clinging to Xuanmin, he radiated an air of aloofness that made him seem more like a real dragon than ever. Not hot anymore, Xuanmin asked blandly. There's no other movement coming from inside the house. He's probably alone. But he's unconscious, so questioning him will have to wait. Said Xuxian. Without another word, he summoned a bolt of lightning from the sky. It struck with tremendous force, hitting the ground between the short man's sprawled legs and fracturing the floor into a network of cracks. Under the threat of castration, the short man jolted awake. Part of me's wondering, like, how would he know? He fainted dead and jolted awake. Part of me's wondering, like, how would he know? He fainted dead away. Like, do you feel it in the force that you're about to become a eunuch? Spare me! Spare me! He cried. I'm just a humble stonemason. I've done all the work I was supposed to do, and I'll keep my mouth shut about what I shouldn't say. Please just let me live. This short man was none other than Shito Zhang. Before he'd even fully opened his eyes, he began babbling a string of words. It was clearly something he'd mentally rehearsed for a long time. However, once he came to his senses and found himself under the silent gaze of a massive black dragon, his words faltered. He swallowed the rest of his sentence and his face turned to ashen. Don't stop now. Keep going, Shushan said, his voice as cold as a river in the depths of winter. As he spoke, another bolt of lightning descended from the sky. Its white light froze in midair just above Shitu Zhang's head. The short man was so terrified that his thoughts poured out like a flood. What I said earlier was all nonsense. I didn't mean any offense to you two. I've just been hounded by debt collectors for months and had no choice but to lock myself in the house. And I learned a trick, set up a flimsy array from a Taoist priest, hoping to buy myself a few days of safety. Great immortal, please spare me. Do you expect me to believe that? Shushan sneered. If you are being pursued by ordinary debt collectors, why would you need to set up an array to block them? Shitu Zhang trembled, too afraid to respond. A question. Where did the dragon bone and that sword you were holding come from? Oh, a question. Where did the dragon bone and that sword you were holding come from? Xuanmin cut in abruptly, reminding Shushian of the main issue at hand. That dragon bone? Shitu Zhang looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He repeated in a breathless whisper, Dragon bone? When his eyes met Shushian's, he nearly wet himself again. The thought that he'd unknowingly brought back the bone of a real dragon, meticulously carved it into a sword and polished it, and even engraved designs on it. Ancestors above, how am I still alive? Shitu Zhang's eyes rolled back. He was about to faint again when a cold, threatening voice stopped him. If you close your eyes, don't expect to open them again. I honestly didn't know it was. I just have a knack for spotting things others can't. Shitu Zhang stammered. That time I saw a glimmer in the soil and couldn't resist digging it up. I found the bone and thought it was something special, maybe a spiritual relic, and so I brought it back. People say sharp objects can ward off evil, so I carved it into a sword for protection's sake. Under Shushian's piercing gaze, Shitu Zhang's voice grew quieter and quieter. Where did you dig it up? On the mountain by the river. Must you drag this out, word by word? Shushian's patience was wearing thin. Do you need me to give you a little encouragement? No need. Shitu Zhang was on the verge of tears. I was blindfolded the entire way there. They only removed the blindfold when we arrived. There were no markers on the mountain, so I can't pinpoint where it was exactly. I just remember being able to see the river from the mountain. The river was narrow and swift. The sound of its waves were terrifying. Shushian was so furious he nearly fell over. The lightning hovering above Shitu Zhang's head crashed down with a loud bang, narrowly missing him. Shitu Zhang was too scared to move. He stood stiff as a coffin board, tears streaming down his face. What were you taken there to do? Xuanmin added. They had me carve 7 stone locks and 2 tomb guardian beasts. Shitu Zhang was as pale as a ghost as he answered. Xuanmin nodded in understanding and pulled a thin sheet of paper from his hidden pouch, unfolding it in front of Shitu Zhang. Was this pattern made by you? Yes, that's what they had me carve. While I was working on it, I could sense the spiritual energy in the pattern, so I asked them about it. They told me it was a longevity talisman, very potent, but where did you get this rubbing master? That stone lock of yours, Xuanmin replied. It's probably lying at the bottom of the river now. Do you recognize the corpse it was tied to? Corpse? Shitu Zhang had clearly never imagined that the stone locks he carved would be attached to a corpse. He shook his head frantically. I don't know. I just carved what they asked for. When the client came to me, they only said my sculptures had the most spiritual energy. I assumed it was some out-of-town noble who wanted me to carve something for display. I never thought... He hesitated. Anyway, things haven't been peaceful for me lately. Feels like someone wants me dead, but I haven't offended anyone. That incident was the only strange thing that happened to me, so that's why I've been hiding. Shushian's gaze bore into Shitu Zhang, sending chills down his spine. Finally, Shushian spoke in a cold, detached tone. Did the person who took you to that mountain leave anything with you? Anything? What sort of anything? Anything that has passed through their hands. Shitu Zhang was about to shake his head when he suddenly slapped his thigh. Oh, right! There is one thing. What is it? The black cloth they used to blindfold me. I still have it. I didn't dare throw it away. Shushan snorted. Well done. Shitu Zhang scrambled into the inner chamber and unearthed a piece of black cloth. It was unclear how long it had been stuffed in there, or whether it had ever been washed. Xuanmin frowned, his face tinged with slight disgust. He was about to find something to use as a barrier to pick up the cloth. Shushian noticed Xuanmin's expression and, remembering his earlier reaction, reached out with his claw to grab the cloth himself. Taken aback, Xuanmin glanced at him, but Shushian didn't return the gaze. Let's go, Shushian said, his tone indifferent. Xuanmin was silent for a moment before asking, Where? To the heavens, Shushian retorted sarcastically, then turned to Shitu Zhang. Stop shaking like a leaf and come with us. If I'm not mistaken, you're planning to return to the Lu residence, Xuanmin observed. Do you intend to go back like this? As he spoke, his eyes swept over Shushian's massive dragon form. Shushian blinked. He'd been so angry he'd almost departed as an entire normal-sized dragon. Whoops. He couldn't transform back into his compact form in his current state. His meridian skin and bones were still swollen with heat, making it impossible for him to shrink that much. If he couldn't transform into a small dragon, his only other option was to take human form. Xuanmin held up the bundle of clothes. Shushian grabbed it with his claw, his face set. Just one problem. At his current size, he would not fit in any one room. So how the hell was he supposed to get dressed, huh? The heavens must have been jealous of his good looks, since they were always playing these jokes on him. Okay, so as promised, I'm going to show you the pictures from the front, because that was the end of that chapter. So here is our cover. Very beautiful. Here's the extended picture, which is very shiny, so I'm going to angle it down. There you go. I like that it's like flowy. So fancy! Yeah, the artwork really is gorgeous. I agree, Gabby. Just double checking. Okay, tiny. Okay, chapter 16, Traveler from Afar. Shushian was a dragon who cared deeply about his reputation, given his lifestyle and the transcendent status he held for the majority of his life. At least, that's what he would have told anyone who asked. Still, maintaining his dignity was an unbreakable rule for him. Sometimes he made concessions and ignored his pride. Like when he lounged around, barking orders at that bookworm Jiang Xining, or when he helped himself to Xuan Mian's Min's money. I don't know why I just struggled so hard with Min. That was weird. Okay. I am gonna give a tally to Jiang Xining because he's getting dissed even if it's just internally. So he is at 15. But there were situations where compromise wasn't an option, especially when it came to his image and authority. If he were in good health and had a full set of functional limbs, then being seen naked wouldn't be a big deal to him. He wasn't ashamed of his physique, and he was no ordinary person. It wasn't in his nature to kick up such a fuss about changing clothes. But he was now a paraplegic, and just moving was frustrating. Being naked was one thing. Enduring the bald donkey's condescending gaze was another. Be too much to bear. The mere thought of the scenario made Shushian want to grind his teeth. He'd rather be hanged than face someone in such a state. Right. 44. Shushian turned his deadpan gaze on Shitu Zhang. Hey, do me a favor and kick the bucket for a moment. Shitu Zhang blinked. Kicking the bucket meant dying. How could he do that for just a moment? He didn't know what a force to be reckoned with Shushian was. Without waiting for a response, Shushian summoned 2 bolts of lightning in quick succession, scaring Shitu Zhang so badly that his legs collapsed and his eyes rolled back. He had fainted on the spot. Shitu Zhang had the courage of a sparrow. Scare him and he'd cry. Startle him and he'd faint. He was easy to deal with. Min was a different story. Shushian shot him a dark glare. Tell me, how can I make you faint? I'll try every method. The dark spirit was being unreasonable again. Min stayed silent. The quickest way to make someone faint was to hit them on the head. Shushian raised his claw and waved it back and forth in front of Min's face, with complete disregard for how Min might feel about this method. Min glanced at Shushian's stubby dragon claw and pushed it down. A gentleman must conceal his sharpness. Translated into more normal terms, stop waving that claw around. Shushian let out a short, cold snort. Who are you to tell me what to do? Nevertheless, he gave up on making Min faint. He didn't have much control over his strength in his current form. If he miscalculated and struck too hard, they'd be visiting the bald donkey's grave this time next year. It was true he was annoyed with Min, but not enough to actually want to kill him. 45. Not getting the chance to make Min suffer only soured Shushian's mood further. He turned his upper body away, no longer interested in bothering Min, and instead summoned a cloud of mist. A thick white fog gathered around Min, enveloping him and obscuring his view. Shushian swiftly sliced through the knot on the bundle of clothes with his claw, and his massive body was swallowed by a brilliant white light. Though the light was blinding to Min, it appeared soft and gentle as it filtered through the mist. That was nice. I mean, I know it was mostly just to conceal his face, but it was still nice. Within the light, Shushian transformed into his human form. Though his body wasn't fully healed, wielding a bit of magic posed no difficulty for a real and mighty dragon. Even while half paralyzed, changing clothes was hardly a challenge. By the time the light began to fade, he was already mostly dressed. Min had briefly thought about offering to help, but it seemed that wasn't necessary. He stood in the frosty winter mist, studied the fading light, and waited patiently. Mist never lasted long. From the moment it enveloped Min, it began to thin and disperse. By the time the mist had cleared enough to see, Shushian was draping a large cloud-like garment over himself. His lean waist and the outline of his shoulder blades flashed briefly as he moved his arms before they were concealed by a black robe. The clothing was simple and plain, without any embellishments or decorations. It made for quite a contrast with Shushian's mischievous personality, but it was what he preferred to wear. The ink-black collar accentuated his profile, and the visible parts of his neck, rendering them extremely pale, almost sickly. When he wasn't smiling or making trouble, his dark eyes were half-lidded and languid. His black eyelashes cast faint shadows at the corners of his eyes, and his unmistakable lips gave him an air of detachment. He was strikingly handsome, yet a little unapproachable. So he fits in with Xuanmin. Perhaps it was the brief glimpse of his pale back or the impassiveness of Shushian's profile, a stark contrast to the mocking smile he'd worn when well perched on the Liu family's courtyard wall, that caused Xuanmin to freeze for a moment. Shushian shifted, his dark eyes flickering over to in a sideways glance. The mist had completely dissipated, so he casually tugged his collar shut and hurried to fasten the hidden buttons. Then, as if performing a magic trick, he produced a thin black cord, bit down on it, and used it to tie his hair in a few quick motions. Shushian lowered his hands and conjured a gust of wind beneath him for support. With a swift push and flip, the hem of his dark robes billowed like clouds before fluttering down. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed a wooden chair and sprawled lazily over it. Even when half paralyzed, he couldn't resist striking a pose. Xuanmin wondered what was wrong with him. "Can we go?" Shushian tapped the armrest of the chair with his fingers. Said Xuanmin. He took a step forward as if to reach for Shushian. Shushian immediately slapped the armrest, causing the chair to screech across the floor and carry him back a good distance. "What are you doing?" he demanded with wide-eyed surprise. Xuanmin dropped his hand. "How else do you plan to get back? Can you walk or fly?" "I really can fly. What are you going to do about it?" Shushian mentally retorted, though he didn't say it out loud. He couldn't just float through the sky in broad daylight. Doing so would scare the entire county out of its wits. Xuanmin just added fuel to the fire. "Do you plan to summon a gust of wind and bound back, chair and all, like you did earlier?" Why did I hesitate back then? Should have swatted this bald donkey dead and been done with it. I would have spared me his sarcastic remarks. Acting so serious when he says them. Bah! Who cares about you? 46. Shushian spat venom in his heart, but his expression was numb. "Fine. Do me a favor and turn around, squat down, and carry me." Before Shushian could finish his sentence, Xuanmin had walked over, bent down, and effortlessly scooped Shushian up. One of Xuanmin's hands supported the back of Shushian's neck, while the other hooked beneath his knees. It was as though Xuanmin wasn't carrying a full-grown man, but cradling a fallen leaf in his palm. "This monk does not squat or kneel, nor does he hunch when walking," Xuanmin said as he straightened up. Forget inside his heart. Shushian wanted to spew his guts in Xuanmin's face. "Who are you trying to fool? You squatted just fine when you were digging me up with that rusty copper piece at the Jiang family clinic." But he couldn't afford to kick up a fuss in Xuanmin's arms. If he lost his balance and fell, it'd be horrifically humiliating. Shushian held his breath, almost suffocating himself in the process. He glanced around, feeling that this position enfeebled him and stripped him of his dignity. His eyes fluttered around until he came up with a solution. He grabbed the bundle of clothes, shook out another black robe, and cloaked himself from head to toe. When you are forced into an embarrassing situation, remember one thing. Cover your face. Shushan was already dressed in black, and now his entire head and face were covered by black fabric. He lay like a corpse in Xuanmin's arms, as if he had already breathed his last. Xuanmin considered bowing to him in defeat. Shushan remained motionless for a moment, then remembered Shitu Zhang was unconscious on the ground. He raised a pale, ghostly hand and casually summoned another thunderclap, loud enough to wake anyone and everyone within a 10-mile radius. The related bolt struck right beside Shito Zhang's ear, jolting him awake. Almost done. Shito Zhang scrambled to his feet with a mournful expression and slunk over to stand behind Xuanmin. When he saw the figure in Xuanmin's arms, he stumbled again. It took him a while to steady his trembling legs and stand upright. From under the fabric, Shushan's muffled voice said, "All set, let's go." Xuanmin shook his head and strode out of the courtyard. It had to be said that the wise one's unconventional methods were effective. Hardly anyone dared to glance in Xuanmin's direction. At the sight of the lifeless figure in his arms, people turned away in disgust. They covered their faces and hurried off, unwilling to look for a moment longer. By the time the two men and their Irsaz corpse entered the Liu family courtyard, the sky had already darkened. Jiang Xining had just stepped out of the kitchen and was startled by the cloaked figure Xuanmin was carrying. Having spent more time with Shushan than Xuanmin, and being someone who paid close attention to details, Jiang Xining immediately recognized the hand dangling out from the cloth. Jiang Xining's hands trembled, and he nearly dropped the lamp he was holding as he rushed over. Fortunately, Xuanmin was quick to explain. "He's alive and well, just pretending to be dead." What? What kind of play is he putting on this time? Xuanmin didn't answer. He strode into the main hall and placed Shushan in a chair beside the square table. Only then did Shushan remove the cloth covering his face and let out a long sigh. Oh, I almost suffocated in there. Exasperated, Jiang Xining set the oil lamp on the table. "You brought it upon yourself. Serves you right." He then rounded on Shitu Zhang, his gaze brimming with ghostly energy. "And this fellow is?" Startled by Jiang Xining's dull and lifeless eyes, Shitu Zhang stammered, "Just a stonemason. You can call me Old Chang or Shitu Zhang." Shushan pointed to a stone lock leaning against the wall. "Look there. Did you carve that?" Shitu Zhang glanced at it and immediately nodded. Yes, that indeed is my work. I recognize it." "So, that's the story," Shushan said, shrugging at Jiang Xining. "He has a connection with the person who set up the tomb on Fentu Island, and he happens to have something that person or their subordinate touched. Once Lu Nianqi wakes up, we can have him do a divination. We might uncover some clues." Lu Nianqi? Jiang Xining was confused before understanding and sank in. "Are you saying he has that kind of ability?" Shushan nodded. "I surmise so." He idly played with the flame of the lamp while in his chair. After a couple of flicks, he suddenly slapped the table. "Right! I had almost forgotten." Jiang Xining and Shitu Zhang had been huddled by the table. At this, they jumped and turned to him, expecting some kind of profound insight. Instead, Xu Xian shot Xuanmin a sidelong glance and said, "What about that meal you owe me?" What nonsense is this? Jiang Xining asked. Good heavens, that scared me, Shi Tusheng said. Xuanming gave Shu Xian a look, then turned and strode out of the hall. About 10 minutes later, he returned, calm and composed, carrying a random takeout box. His demeanor made it seem like he was holding a lotus flower placed before a Buddha statue, not food, Jiang Xining. Not food. Jiang Xining glanced at him and then at Shu Xian seated next to him, still lounging in his chair. Jiang Xining silently turned his face away. The food box was comprised of 4 layers. There were 6 dishes and a plate of pastries. Shu Xian scanned the table. The porcelain plates were warm, the dishes delicate and beautifully arranged, emitting a faint aroma that was indeed appealing. But there wasn't a trace of meat in the entire spread. It was all vegetarian. All vegetarian. Had anyone ever seen a dragon survive on grass? Shu Xian rolled his eyes, about to pass out from rage. His old grievances resurfaced, and his frustration with Shu Xian rose yet again. Although his memories were incomplete, his habits remained. He likely hadn't eaten meat in the past, or perhaps he hadn't eaten much at all, which was why he could go days without food and remains perfectly fine. In any case, asking him to buy food meant no meat. Jiang Xining had to be the one to make another trip and bring back some hearty dishes. In the end, they finally got a proper meal. Almost there. Aside from the incident 8 years ago, Lu Nianxi had never experienced such suffering. He'd been in a deep sleep for 7 days, fluctuating between fever and recovery. Occasionally, when the fever spiked, he would mumble a few words in the middle of the night. Sometimes father, sometimes Shiju. Maybe if he didn't open his eyes, the events that had happened wouldn't be real, and those who were gone would still be sitting by his bed, quietly waiting for him to wake up. Oh, poor buddy. On the 7th night, just as the night watchman struck his gong, Lu Nianxi's fingers twitched and he opened his eyes. Because he had been feverish for so long, his eyes were bloodshot. In the light of the oil lamp, they glistened with moisture, like he was perpetually on the verge of tears. Jiang Xining came into the room to trim the lamp wick. When he saw that Lu Nianxi's eyes were open, he asked, "You're awake? Thirsty?" Jiang Xining called out to the main hall to let them know, then walked to Lu Nianqi's bedside and removed the medicinal cloth from his forehead. He shivered at the cold touch of Jiang Xining's ghostly body, and the moisture in his eyes slipped over, dampening the corner of the blanket. Is today the 7th day? Jiang Xining paused before he nodded. Yes, it's the last night. Lu Nianqi covered his eyes with the back of his hand for a moment, then sat up. Is he still here? I'll spend the last night with him. Jiang Xining wondered if he was imagining things, but after his long sleep, Lu Nianqi's tone had become uncannily similar to Lu Shiju's. When Lu Nianqi stood up, Jiang Xining grew even more certain of his suspicions. Lu Nianqi, once so small, had grown a few inches in the 7 days. He no longer looked like a 7 or 8-year-old boy, but someone around 11 or 12. Lu Nianqi felt his way out of the room and nodded listlessly at everyone. Under Jiang Xining's guidance, he entered the side room, closed the door, and stayed there the entire time. Throughout the night, the side room was completely silent. No crying, no talking. When he'd promised to accompany Lu Shiju, he genuinely meant it. He stayed by his side, without speaking, without clinging to him, just as they had always been. I got 3 pages and I'm fading fast. We're gonna get through it. The next morning, Lu Nianqi emerged from the room, his face pale. He touched the wooden twigs Lu Shiju had left him and stared in Shitu Zhang's direction for a long time before saying softly, "Excuse me, would you carve 2 wooden tablets for me?" Although he was a stonemason, Shitu Zhang was also capable of working with wood, just not as skillfully as with stone. He was momentarily taken aback, but nodded. Shu Xian helpfully explained, "He can't see you're nodding." Shitu Zhang stared at Lu Nianqi's eyes for a moment. He dared not say too much. Of course. Having lived in Wulong County for many years, Shitu Zhang was somewhat acquainted with the Lu family, even if they weren't close. When he heard Lu Nianqi's request, he understood what he needed. He was a skilled craftsman, so he swiftly whittled out 2 tablets and carved some traditional etchings along the sides. "What should I engrave upon them?" he asked. "On one, in memory of my late father, Lu Yuan," Lu Nianqi said. Shitu Zhang did as instructed and carefully carved out the words. "And the other?" he asked after blowing away the wood shavings. Lu Nianqi fell silent for a long time. What should be engraved on the other one? Lu Shiju's formal name? He hadn't lived long enough to be given one of those, so there was nothing to be carved there. Shiju was just a nickname, one shared by countless others. Using that name in the underworld might lead to confusion. Moreover, Lu Nianqi didn't want to carve Shiju's name. It felt as if doing so would mean his brother, always so aloof, even though he'd given his life for Lu Nianqi, would truly be gone forever. Forget it. Leave the other one blank, Lu Nianqi said. He took the 2 tablets from Shitu Zhang, fumbled through a cabinet for some cloth, without asking for help, packed some simple belongings and wrapped the tablets inside, tying it securely. He then sat by the square table with the bundle, holding the wooden twigs and facing Shu Xian. "I know what you want. I've known from the moment I opened my eyes. I can help you with the divination in Shiju's place, though I might not be as accurate as he was. I only ask one thing. Help me bury Shiju." Even if he didn't like relying on others, burying someone wasn't something a half-blind person could do alone. "Consider it done," Shu Xian replied. The black cloth Shitu Zhang handed over had been kept in Xuanmin's pouch. Now that they spread it out over the table for Lu Nianqi to perform, now they spread it out over the table for Lu Nianqi to perform divination with. Lu Nianqi's eyes were clouded and misty as he stared at the black cloth. He sprinkled a handful of fine soil onto the table and slowly traced out patterns with the wooden branch. His movements and expression bore an uncanny resemblance to Lu Shiju's, as if 2 souls resided within one body. When he finished, he gently touched the soil, frowning a little in thought. "I'm afraid I don't have Shiju's spiritual acuity. I could only tell that the person you're looking for is currently on the other side of the river. I can see the general appearance of their location, but I can't pinpoint the exact spot. You might have to go there to find it." He smoothed out the soil on the table and performed the divination again to the same results. However, he didn't seem surprised by this. He patted the bundle on the table and spoke. "If you don't mind an extra burden, I can go with you." After all, he had no living relatives in Wulong County. Without family, his roots were severed, and it made no difference where he lived. Someone who could discern the origins of objects would naturally be a valuable addition to the group. They'd already spent considerable time in Wulong County and couldn't afford to keep delaying. So in the dim morning light, they buried Lu Shiju beside Lu Huan's grave. Lu Nianqi knelt before the grave, bowing his head to the ground 3 times on each side. Then he brushed the dirt from his clothes with a calm expression, shouldered the memorial tablets, and set off with Xuan Min and the others. When they boarded the passenger boat across the river, the sky was overcast and a heavy snow began to fall. The fine snow alighted on the nameless new grave in the mountains and on the top of the black awning of the lone boat. It blanketed both the underworld and the bustling mortal realm. It was a grand farewell, bidding goodbye to both the nameless ghost and the traveler embarking on a distant journey. Perhaps this was the deepest expression of yearning and reluctance to part that could be expressed by humans. You're gone, but it's all right. I'll become you and carry you with me. From this moment onward, time would never trouble them again. They would traverse the same path through countless mountains and share the same boat across endless waters. And with that, we end our reading for tonight. Just so you know, we're back to our usual schedule. So Tuesday, Thursday, 8 o'clock CST. And I'll give you a little sneak peek. This is where we start next time. So we finished arc 2. But yes, I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. I am excited to be back into it, and we'll actually finish the series like mid-August, which is crazy. So stay tuned. Thank you everyone who was here during the live, and thank you everyone who listened later. And hopefully see you next time. Good night, everybody, and of course, Gabby.